Hi, everybody. My name is Carl Darden, and I'd like to welcome and thank all of you for joining us today here on Navy Sports Central. I'm your host, and this is the official podcast of the Navy Sports Nation, where we take a deeper dive into Navy sports. This is a special bonus episode where we'll take a look back at the Navy-Delaware game. Obviously, it wasn't the result we were looking for, but we're only one game into the season, and the things that did go sideways on Saturday can be fixed pretty easily. So stay with us as we break things down. All right, it is good to have you all here for this bonus episode, and I say that because the normal schedule is an episode every 2 weeks or so. I wanted to put this one out to kick off the Navy football season, and I'm not going to lie to you, while I was figuring on it being a pretty tough game, I thought the Mids were going to win. So trust me when I tell you it's tough for me to talk about a loss so soon after it happens. And I knew I was going to need some help to get through this, so I reached out to my old friend and classmate Mark Storto to get some of his insights, and we're going to just jump right in and get things started. All right, Mark, great to have you back on the podcast to help you break down the Mids' first game. We're going to get to how things played out in a little bit, but before that, I wanted to see if you could share with us your overall assessment of the team going into that matchup against Delaware, and we can start with the offense if you like.
Yeah, sure. So some question marks in my mind on the offense this year because, we didn't have a lot of skill players that are coming back with many starts under their belt. The guy who stood out there in my mind was Ty Lavatai, and I'm actually, very excited about Ty for this season. He's a big, strong, running, bruising type quarterback who I believe can also throw, and he showed some real signs of improvement last year. And in my recollection of, successful Navy seasons, we usually had a pretty solid quarterback when we had good seasons and went to bowl games. So I was very excited, mostly about Ty, and I guess second most about some of the offensive players on the line because I think we have like 3 returning starters. So I thought they could really gel this year. Yeah,
you're right about the line. We got you guys like Kip Franklin is one of the mainstays there on the right side. I think he's over there at right tackle. But yeah, Lavatai, I think that was really somebody who I've been kind of high on since the very beginning. And my hope was that he would just continue to improve, and it looks like he had all through the spring camp and everything. And we'll break down the performance in this game in a little bit in terms of, some things that the offense, needs to kind of, tighten up on and stuff like that. But before we do that, what about the defense? What did you see going into the season on defense?
Well, defense, I always loved defense. I'm a guy from Chicago, so you may recall that 85 Bears team.
Right.
And I played 11 years of football myself, and I liked playing defense more than offense. I played 150s on the defensive side of the ball, so I just love defense. I love studying it and watching how teams play and react to things the offense are doing. And I'm very excited about the defense this year. Our coach is amazing. And we've got a number of players. I recall last year as the team, had a frustrating season but started to improve. There were a bunch of sophomores making big plays and stuff like that. So I knew this year they could really gel, and looking very forward to that. Even though we lost Diego Fagot, there was a pretty good supporting underclass class around him that I'm excited about for this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that a lot of people felt like, oh my God, that's going to be one huge gap to fill, and certainly those are some tremendous shoes that we got to account for on the field. But Will Harbor, I felt like was more than capable of getting the job done, and then they got this new kid. He's not new; he's a sophomore, but this is the first time seeing the field. Is Jihani Whitson Brooks, who, according to Coach Newberry, is just a complete stud. He says he doesn't have an ounce of body fat on him. He's quick. He just fires to the ball. He's just all over the field. And we saw a little of that yesterday, and we'll talk a little bit about his performance. And you and I can both remember back when Navy just had these unbelievable offenses and everything, and the whole goal was, okay, can the defenses get one stop the entire game? Because if they can do that, they're going to win the game.
Yeah.
But now it's just like, okay, defense is good, all right? We don't have anything to worry about unless they just get wrecked with injuries or something. But at least in terms of personnel, we've got the folks there to get the job done.
Yep. Yeah, and the scheme. I think a lot of it's the scheme since they brought Newberry on board. Even when we had, those recent losing seasons, more often than not, the defense would show up to play.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So, all right, let's kind of get into the game itself. Game starts, and clearly there were some issues with ball security in the first half, but if we put that aside a little bit, I want to get your feeling for how the offense looked early in the game. I know when I'm checking them out, I'm looking for just different cues. Are they on? Are they off? And if they're off, why is that?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm asking you to see if you can assess watching them.
Well, they were definitely off. If I had to, and I was thinking about this ever since the game ended, if I had to grade the offensive line, and, it's not like I cut film or anything, and they'll know better than we will when they watch the films today or tomorrow or whenever they do that. But I think the offensive line I would grade out at about a C.
Mm-hmm.
I remember plays where they just made some beautiful blocks and got off the ball and had gaping holes. And then there were plays when Delaware was getting in the backfield right away. So I think they would grade themselves as a C at best.
Uh-huh.
And I think I heard elements of that from Kip in the press conference.
Right.
And then the skill players, I would probably give an F to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was a disaster. The timing was off for some reason. The fumbles that occurred due to poor timing or indecision. It wasn't Delaware coming in and tomahawking the ball. It was our skill players just messing up. And I don't know why, but they seemed really out of sync.
Yeah, there was a couple of plays where obviously two of the three lost fumbles were on the exchange. And even the one that Ty was able to recover was on the exchange also. But on one play that did not result in a fumble, it was, Ty had the ball out to the right and Logan Point was coming from the left. It's almost like, okay.
Oh, yeah.
So there's clearly a miscommunication there. So that sort of thing, once that gets tightened up, because obviously that's not Navy football there, and I don't expect to see that next week against Memphis either. So it was frustrating to see that.
Yes. But
on the other side, when you saw some of the plays where they're able to bust for double-digit gains, Mikel Haywood had a couple, Ty had 2 double-digit gains, and when you see that happening, when a quarterback like him can get into the next level and pick up 12 to 14 yards, that's not bad. So now it's okay, can we do this more consistently, and once that happens, I think good things can follow. So
and I think a lot of us would have been happy if we had the old semi-boring Navy successful option where they got 3 and 4 yards of play.
Yeah. Right, because it is a little bit frustrating when you pick up 7 and then go 1 and 1, and then okay, well, do we kick? Do we go for it? And then unfortunately, they were 0 for 3, I believe, on 4th down conversions yesterday, which is unusual for them. So,
very much so.
All right, so what I wanted to do next was kind of get into these 5 factors that I spoke about in the last podcast episode and see how much of a role they played in the outcome of the game. And as you recall, if you may recall, they were explosiveness, efficiency, starting field position, finishing drives, and turnovers. And, obviously the turnovers were a big deal. But I think what was interesting to me was when I looked at some of the other factors, I thought that, Delaware had him won hands down, but that wasn't the case. And we'll start with explosiveness, okay? And just to kind of refresh people's memories, what I'm looking for here is the average number of yards gained per play. All right. That includes passing and running. And what really helped the mids out in this particular situation was the average number of yards they gained when they threw the ball, because the average yards per run was only I think it was just under 3. I think it was 2.9, which, you're shooting for at least 3.5 to 4. So 2.9 isn't horrible, but, nevertheless, I think they were looking for a little bit more than that. And the passing did kind of bail them out. But anyway, they ran a total of 76 plays and gained a total of 319 yards, which worked out to be about 4.2 yards per play. Now, that wasn't much different than what they did against Army in the last game of the season last year in terms of just the average. Now, compared to Delaware ran 52 plays. They gained a total of 202 yards, and that worked out to be about 3.9 yards per play. So Navy actually won that metric. Okay, so that's one in the column for them. And again, it was mostly due to the passing. And if we look next to efficiency, which is a little bit more of a precise measure of explosiveness, the efficiency, what we're looking at here is, are they gaining the right number of yards per down to keep the offense on schedule? So for instance, if you're dealing with a 1st and 10, you're looking for the team to pick up at least half those yards on 1st down, and then basically, what was the number? I think it was like 30 to 40% of the yards on the second down, and then the remaining yards on the third or fourth down. So, for instance, 1st and 10, you're looking for at least 5 yards, okay? The rest of the way, you're looking for, if you have like a 2nd and 5, if they get 3, then that's good, and then hopefully they pick up the other 2 on third, and if they don't get it all, they can get it on 4th down, depending on what their field position is if they go for it. So, looking at efficiency, the mids were, when I counted everything up, and ESPN is so cool because they document every single play, which is awesome. You can just kind of go through and count them up. But they had 36.5% efficiency, and that was actually Delaware's, and the mids was 32.8. So Delaware won that metric. And if you could kind of talk a little bit about what you saw them doing on offense, clearly they were mostly passing the ball because they'd completely been shut down on the ground.
Yeah, well, I just think that they were probably frustrated. I think they're going to put up a lot more points against the rest of their schedule this year than they did against Navy, because they faced what I think is probably a top 20 or top 30, FBS defense in Navy, and Navy played very well. So, I think we frustrated them a lot. I actually saw their quarterback make a few bad passes, and I think that might have been because they were in his face. I think they had 5 sacks.
Oh, yeah.
So, I don't think he's going to see another defense like that this year. And they couldn't. I don't recall them being able to establish the run much.
No,
at all.
not at all.
But when he made key plays at certain points, and that helped them get their scores. The first touchdown, for example, that was a really nice play. I think it was a tight end or maybe another receiver got in behind our secondary, and they were very efficient then. But I think we frustrated them. 14 points. They're usually going to be in the 20s, 30s, 40s, I'm guessing, the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think you're right. And from what I was seeing, too, I mean, obviously they ran 52 plays compared to 76 for the mid. So they definitely did a better job of making good on whatever few opportunities that they had. I mean, that second touchdown was a busted play, and it came off of a weird sequence of penalties. I mean, did you get that at all?
Yeah, I was a little, I'm a competitor like a lot of us are. And, I was a little frustrated with the refs. I thought they made some bad calls, but, there's no way you can blame this game on the refs. But sure would like to see a little more consistency from the refs next game.
Yeah, because the one play I'm talking about, it looked like Delaware was going to get flagged for a false start. Then another ref ran in there and said, no, it's a personal foul on Navy because they were doing something to influence the, I don't know, I forget what the specific term was, but it was having to do with interfering with the quarterback making the calling the signals, I guess, to try and screw up their offense. So, that I have heard of before, and I, not being down on the field, of course, we couldn't hear anything, but hopefully that wasn't a mistake. I doubt it was. Yeah, because then the touchdown came like 2 plays later, so I don't know if that had anything to do with discombobulating the defense or whatever. But
yeah, and I think either Randy Cross or the other guy covering the game said that there was going to be an emphasis on that kind of penalty this year. So usually when the refs are going to do a new emphasis, they inform all the coaches during the off season, and Navy should be able to prepare for that.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, so. Anyway, so Delaware won that efficiency battle. They were at 36.5% in terms of hitting their targeted yardage on those downs versus 32.8 for Navy. So a little bit of a difference there, and clearly the biggest advantage was having that short field, on their very, very first possession, and also that busted play obviously didn't hurt either, because when we get to our next metric, which is finishing drives, you'll see that. Navy made it inside the 40 3 times, and they came away with just 7 points. The first time was when they missed a field goal. And by the way, I was as surprised as you were when I didn't see Bijan Nichols out there getting ready to try that field goal. Not sure if he's hurt or what, but I didn't see any reference to him being injured before the game. Did you?
Right. No, and then I think they showed in the pregame and the coverage that he was trying to kick some balls in the pregame, but he really couldn't do it. So I'm guessing he probably got injured recently and in practice, and then, just tried to see if he could go today, and he couldn't. And that's huge for Navy, as you know. Every possession is huge for us. Every score is huge for us. And if we had a healthy Bijan Nichols, I think that may have made at least a 3 to 6 point difference in the game. Yeah,
for sure, because we look at, obviously, with the mids running the option like they do, scoring touchdowns inside the red zone is just uber important, right? But they're not always going to get inside the 20, and that's when it's always good to have a guy like Nichols because he's money from inside of 40 anyway.
Right. He really is. Yeah. And the kid the person who backed him up made a pretty nice kick, but it was just wide, I think, a little bit. But Nichols has so much experience. It's like you said, it's money knowing that you have him there.
Right. So missed field goal on the first trip inside the 40. They got the touchdown in the third quarter. And then the last time they made it inside the 40 was on the very, very last drive. So, and of course that was incomplete to Haywood in the end zone there. So 1 for 3 for a total of 7 points. Delaware they got there 4 times, but they only scored 7 points too. And that was on the very first, series of the game.
Right.
Navy shut them down. They got the missed field goal. They stopped them on downs inside the 2. And then stopped him on another set of downs in the fourth quarter. I was actually surprised that Delaware went for that one. I think they're just kind of trying to close out the game, but it didn't work out.
Yeah, I think they were, yeah.
And then, they were 1 for 4 inside the 40. And so, again, Navy wins that metric. But unfortunately, one of the touchdowns, the second touchdown that Delaware scored came from 51 yards out. So that's kind of a bummer. That tends to negate any kind of advantage you might have on finishing drives. So anyway.
Yeah, we, being 0 for 3 on fourth down conversions was a killer. The 3 turnovers was a killer. So kind of like what Coach frequently says, if you turn the ball over too much, you can't beat anybody. So
yeah, that's so true because it's not so much that Delaware scored off the turnovers. They scored off the first one, but not on the next 2.
Yeah.
But what they were depriving Navy of is obviously that possession.
Right.
Because the third fumble, they were driving. I mean, I think they lost that one just outside the Delaware 40, and the offense looked like they were starting to kind of move. So, man, we hang on to that one there, and who knows, maybe they punch it in and, things are a little bit different. But the ball didn't, the ball security just wasn't there in this first game. So
absolutely.
And of course that brings us to starting field position is always an interesting one. That's the fourth metric. And the mid started at the roughly the 28-yard line if you look at all their possessions and average it up, whereas Delaware started at the 30, almost the 34.
Yeah. Which
I thought they had a bigger advantage there because they started so many times in Navy territory. But your numbers are the percentages are, if you start anywhere between the 32 and the 36-yard line, your chances of winning actually double compared to if you start somewhere between the 24 and the 28. So it's interesting how that correlates, but it did in this case. I mean, they won the game and they had that 5-yard difference in their favor in terms of starting field position.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the turnovers, we don't need to go into that anymore. That's a fifth metric. And certainly, three turnovers, and Navy got 1, but they weren't able to score off of it, unfortunately.
Yep.
So that was basically your ball game right there.
Yeah, we could have had another 1 or 2, but I think our guys collided on one interception attempt.
Yeah.
It looked like an easy catch, and then they bumped into each other, and there may have been one other that's eluding me right now that I thought we should have had. So.
Yeah, well, there's the very first one that Delaware recovered. The receiver caught it, and then I think it was Rayon Lane knocked it out of his hands. But then the ball bounced right back to the receiver as he was falling down.
Yeah, that's the one. Yep.
Okay, so that covers the 5 factors that will usually determine the winner of college football games these days. Delaware came out on top on those 3-2. Navy had the edge in explosiveness and a very slight advantage on finishing drives, but Delaware was the winner in efficiency, starting field position, and turnovers. In fact, just looking at the turnovers by themselves, they had 3 fumble recoveries compared to just 1 for the mids, and the chances of winning with a +2 advantage there are nearly 79%. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll go ahead and continue with our recap of the Navy-Delaware game. All right, thanks for staying with us on Navy Sports Central. Carl Darden here with you, along with Mark Storto, and we are continuing with our breakdown of the Navy-Delaware game. Mark, let's talk a little about some of the good things you saw, both on offense and defense, if you can name any specific players. Mikhail Haywood, he was the one guy I was kind of keeping my eye on. What did you see as far as he was concerned?
I was impressed. Didn't he have Which slot back had the 2 receptions for
That was
quite a
him.
bit of yardage?
That was him.
Was that him? Yeah. So he was obviously impressive there. I recall those. And then I was really most impressed as far as the skill players. Again, as a group, I give them an F for the game. But I really liked the performance of, I don't know if it's pronounced Daba?
Yeah, Daba Fofana.
Yeah, I was very impressed with him. Of all the players in the skill positions, he to me got an A. I just love the way he was running and giving second effort as a fullback. And I look at the roster; he's about my height, but he's 205, and I'm sure he's faster than me and stronger than me. So that it's always nice to see a strong Navy fullback, and that's kind of small. That's kind of undersized,
right,
compared to the Kyle Eccles and some of the guys we've seen in recent years. But he played, above that size for sure, and I hope he stays that consistent. And I hope that Logan Point and Anton Hall Jr. can get in stride with what he was doing yesterday. And if we can get that fullback position straightened out and consistent, that's a huge cog in a Navy option offense. If you can get the fullback established, that's when you start to open up your slot backs and all that other fun stuff we can do,
Yeah, for sure. And Fofana finished, he led the team in rushing with 47 yards on 15 carries. And he had that one now it didn't matter because that was the drive that Navy ended up scoring the touchdown on, but he had that one where he busted for 13 yards and he was steps away from, getting deep into the second level. So he's definitely got the speed to get there. And I'd made the comment, I don't know if it was on one of my Facebook posts or maybe it was on the podcast, but you look at those 3 fullbacks, all of them have above average speed. And I think that one of them, I'm just going to say this now, one of them between now and the end of the year, I believe that they will break one for over 50 yards.
Yeah, I believe that too.
Maybe they get into the end zone, maybe they don't, but it'll go for over 50 yards because they're capable of doing that. Whereas last year's fullback was a strength for us last year as a team, I think, in terms of just consistency, but we didn't have the position speed there that we do this year.
Yep, and they're all 3 of these guys are sophomores, so it's promising for future years as well.
Yeah, for sure. And the other thing worth noting offensively is Ty Lavatai's ability to pass the ball. He completed 5 passes on 13 attempts, and he wisely threw a couple of ways just to kind of stay out of trouble. But the ones he did complete were really, really nice. I mean, he put a lot of zip on them when he needed to, and he showed on the completion to both Umbarger and Haywood that he could deliver it with touch also. And to your point, I think it goes back to making sure we get things established with the fullback and everything, because if that happens, then they might be able to work in some packages where he throws the ball a little bit more that are designed pass plays, right?
Right.
I mean, like I said before, he had Umbarger on a nice play. He had Haywood on 2 nice passes. Just really, really good stuff.
Yeah. We have to be able to have more yards, whether it's fullback, slot backs, quarterback. If we're not rushing for at least 260, then we're not playing Navy football. And I think we were under 200 yards in this game.
Yeah, it was, I think it came out to be 189, something like that. And 135 for passing, which is kind of unusual. Now one of those was the 37-yarder to Walker that ended the first half. So, that was kind of a long punt, but still it was a good pass and well executed. So,
right.
All right. So, let's talk a little bit about what you would like to see. Oh, let's just jump on the defense. Remember we talked about Coach Newberry's and his Get 6 concept. I went ahead and ran the numbers ahead of time, and they didn't just get 6; they got 8. So they had the fumble recovery. Unfortunately, nothing came from that on the offensive side, but they had 5 3-and-outs and 2 fourth-down stops, including a big one in the first half where the game could have gotten away from the Mids had they not stopped them.
Yeah, they're outstanding on defense. And then, I'm surprised that wasn't tackles for losses or sacks in the mix somewhere?
Not specific to that stat, but I thought they were too. Let's go ahead and look at it. I mean, they had 5.
Yeah, because they had 5 sacks, I think.
Yeah, 5 sacks, and they had 12 tackles for a loss. I mean, Marshall by himself had 3.5.
Yeah.
So the defense was just flying all over the field. So I think that, like you, I've always been more of a defensive guy. I just like that whole notion of, okay, you're going to try and do something and we're going to stop you. I mean, that's what they're all about.
Yeah, they played so well as a unit that I can't even say really certain guys stood out because they were just all over the place. A couple of letdowns, but you're always going to have that in any game. Um, but number 44, Colin Ramos,
Oh yeah.
sophomore,
Uh-huh.
he had a really good game.
Yep. Yep.
He stood out to me. If any individual player did, he did. And I remember our big defensive tackle, nose guard, Bernard Jr., he made a
Yeah.
couple nice plays too. And I'm probably overlooking a handful of guys because I was just so happy when we were on defense because they were doing so well. I was enjoying it. I didn't think of any individuals, just the unit was so good together.
Right, right. No, Ramos led the team in tackles with 9, and he had one for a loss. Evan Gibbons had 8 tackles, including 2 for a loss. And who pulled in the sacks? Let me see here. Oh yeah, here's the sacks. Marshall had 2 sacks to go along with his 3.5 tackles for a loss. That's right. And then we had Jake Busick had 2 sacks, and so did Tyler Fletcher. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember Busick making a couple nice plays. Yeah.
Yeah, those guys were getting after it. All right, so we got Memphis next week, right?
Yeah.
Tigers lost to Mississippi State, but it's interesting to me. Navy has always played, no matter what condition Navy's team was in, they've always played Memphis tough, and they got them at home this year. So what do you see? I don't know as much about the Tigers because we're seeing them kind of early in the season. I haven't had a really chance to look at them, but I will during this week. But you look at everything that happened in this first game. Let's assume we fix the ball security issues, right?
Yeah.
What else needs to happen for the team to be successful next week?
Well, I think we need to really establish the running game. Whether it's fullback or slots, we need to keep the sticks moving. If we don't do that, we're not going to win. Even with the great defense we have, which I think is going to do well against Memphis, we have to get the old traditional option going. If we don't get that going, that's our game, then we can't beat anybody. I think they'll get the ball security figured out. I just hope that they get in sync between the offensive line and the skill players so that we can move the sticks. If we can move the sticks, I'm very confident the defense will be there and we should be able to pull out a win. Both teams are 0-1. Both are very desperate and hungry for their first victory. And fortunately, we're at home. Call me crazy, but I'm going to predict a Navy win. I hope we have a healthy Bijan Nichols. That could be a difference maker. But I'm going to predict Navy by 1, 2, or 3 points.
Okay.
It's going to be a nail biter.
Yeah, yeah, big surprise there, huh? I mean, most of them seem to go that way.
Right.
But I think you're right. I would love to see the slot backs more involved on the running side of the ball. I mean, obviously, Mikhail Haywood, had those nice pass receptions there. But certainly getting out to the edge is really going to open up a lot of things. And it all stems from what you were saying before, getting in sync on the offensive line, making sure the timing is good on the exchange, having those fullbacks pick up quality yards, because once that happens, things can really open up. And it would really be fun for me. I mean, I don't ever expect to see the mids throw the ball more than a dozen times a game. Even yesterday, Lavatai put in the air 13 times, which is totally fine. But, having those targets like Walker and Umbarger and, again, Hayward to throw to, it would be really a lot of fun to see them getting out in space and seeing what they can do once they get the ball in their hands. But
yeah,
the one thing I wanted to ask you is, and this is something that we saw a little bit last year, although they didn't really get a chance to do it as much in the Army game as they wanted to because they got hurt. But I remember them, the coaches, talking about it during the spring practices and also leading up to the beginning of the season, maybe working in some packages for Xavier Arline. And I think the only thing that's kind of keeping him from doing that right away is obviously he was playing lacrosse in the spring. And by the way, he had an awesome spring season in lacrosse. And he's just, getting back into the swing of things football-wise and getting the rust knocked off and that sort of thing. But maybe we don't see it next week, but at some point down the road, there might be design packages for him. And Arline's improved as a passer too, but I still like Lavatai, throwing and running the ball because, like you were saying, he's just such a tough, bruising runner, and he just doesn't really give an inch. So that's what I'm hoping. Number one, hoping that maybe they can work in a few more pass plays for him if everything else is clicking on offense. I think that it just won't work, like you were saying, if they don't. So those are just my two observations going into Memphis, and hopefully they can play them as tough as they always do and come away with a win to even things up.
Yeah, when our offense is a well-oiled option machine, we have had games in maybe 8, 10 years ago where we threw no passes or
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
one or two.
yeah,
And if you're just clicking on all cylinders, that's when the passing game was the most fun, even though it was barely existent. They would make some weird call and you're expecting a run and they'd just fake a handoff to the fullback, drop back and hit someone for an 80-yard TD,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I remember those games, and I think those may have happened a little more often during the Paul Johnson era, but we need to definitely establish the run so that we can do more exciting things in the passing game.
yeah. The last guy who really, nailed those types of passes was, I think Keenan Reynolds hit that year that we played Memphis in Memphis, and because that was the first year in the American Conference, and that was a close game until Navy broke it open in the third quarter. Memphis had just scored to tie the game coming out of the half, and the Mids did just what you said. They actually just ran a pass on first down because we just been killing him with the option all day long.
Right.
And then it was just a fake handoff, fake pitch, boom. He goes back and he hits a slot back for a 75-yard touchdown. Just bam, like that.
Yeah, because then they start stacking the box. They'll have 9 guys in there, and they've only got 2 guys covering passes.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I mean, we'll see how things go against Memphis. I'm glad it's a home game. But I would say that just like you were saying, I mean, overall, I mean, the defense obviously gets an A+. The offense, yeah, that was a rough outing for them. I think this is one of those things where, okay, let's watch the film, learn from it, and then just forget about it.
Yeah, that's what they have to do. They have to, they got knocked down. They need to get up and go after it again. And before we get too frustrated, we have to give Delaware some credit. They've got a lot of guys with 5, 6, 7 years experience on that team. I don't know how that happens these days, but they're a top FCS team.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be shocked if they don't end up in the top 5 or 6 this year in FCS.
Mm-hmm.
And like John Marshall was saying in the press conference, some people make too much of the difference between the FBS and the FCS. There's a lot of good players there who played in the FBS, and they transferred or whatever. Delaware is a very good team, and they're going to compete, I think, for the national title this year, even though they have a first-year coach. He won it 2 years ago at Sam Houston State. So before we get too down on ourselves and how our offense played, we have to realize Delaware is a very good team, and they did some good things that may have caused part of our poor timing.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. I'm glad you brought it up. The series now between Delaware and Navy stands at 10-8 Navy. And I think you're right. When you look at top-tier FCS teams, they can compare favorably to mid-tier FBS teams depending on the matchups. And
Absolutely.
And certainly when you're talking about weird things that kind of came into play in the last couple of years, like the pandemic allowing extra eligibility and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, obviously the academy can't take advantage of that. Right, but on the other hand, all these other schools, they're facing a bunch of 24-year-olds. So
exactly.
It can be kind of strange to see that on the other side of the line. But I thank you for pointing that out. Delaware was ranked 19th going into this game, and obviously that's going to bump them up a little bit. But you're right; they're perennial contenders, and their coach, who won it a couple years ago at Sam Houston as an offensive coordinator, he was actually on Delaware's national championship team back in 2003. That beat Navy, by the way, that particular year. So,
yeah. Also, if I saw in the coverage on TV, right, they're either number 1 or number 2 in the FCS for beating FBS teams in the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
About 21 times or something like that.
So. Yeah. They're no joke. That's for sure. So, and I tell you, the one thing I never do, or I try to minimize I don't, when I see games like this, the one thing I don't do is jump on Twitter and see what other Navy fans are saying, because then, a lot of them are hitting panic buttons and stuff like that and just freaking out. And I'm thinking, oh my God. And
well, I've already got that going on in my gray matter, so I don't need to see it. I don't need to see it on Twitter. I get very frustrated when Navy's not winning.
That's exactly right. And I will tell you, just to show you my growth as a fan, there's no way after a Navy loss I'd be in any kind of shape to talk about it less than 24 hours later. Normally,
right. Yeah, I don't know how these guys survive the press conferences when they lose.
I mean, normally I need to basically just say, okay, nobody talk to me for 2 days, and then maybe I'll be willing to kind of address it, and forget about it if they lose the Army. My God, I'm not talking to anybody for a week after that. So.
Yeah, it's funny too. I'm a little bit of a superstitious guy, so I've got a Navy flag with the goat on it, obviously, and I love flying it proudly on game day. And shortly after that game ended, I went out and took it down. I didn't want to talk to my neighbors about what happened.
See, that's why I adopt the strategy of hanging it up after they win.
Yeah, well.
Oh, man. But I guess that's about it. That's I don't have anything else to add to the discussion. I think that we've covered, just about everything. So, Mark, thanks so much for joining me today. That was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
And I definitely want to team up with you on some selected games, but I know that depends on both of our schedules.
Sure.
Sometimes I kind of envy these guys at Sing Second Sports and the other one, the podcast that Wags has, because they got all this support staff and everything. And with me, it's just I'm the head cook and bottle washer here, so it takes a little time to put everything together. But thanks a lot for joining me, Mark, and we'll see how things go next week.
Yeah, it was fun. I appreciate it, and I'll look forward to hopefully a Navy win next week.
All right. Take care, man. Bye-bye. All right, that's going to do it for this special bonus edition of Navy Sports Central. Thank you all again for joining us, and I would definitely like to hear your feedback on this type of a game breakdown. Obviously, this would have been even more fun had Navy won the game, but nevertheless, let me know your thoughts on this, and we can see if we can do more of this type of analysis, time and schedule permitting, in the future. Once again, I'd like to thank my classmate Mark Storto for teaming up with me on this one. It's always great to have the perspective of a former player. And just a quick reminder, the views expressed on Navy Sports Central are my own and do not reflect those of the U.S. Naval Academy or Navy Athletics. By the way, the music used in Navy Sports Central comes to you courtesy of Audio Jungle. This is a great site for purchasing the rights to use music from thousands of artists around the world, and those we feature in the podcast will be credited in our show notes. Talk to you soon, everybody. Until next time, this is Carl Darden. Go Navy, beat Army.